Hey everybody, hope you all had a great weekend. We're here live on To The Point with so much to dive into. It's an exciting week. The NFL returns in just two sleeps. Tomorrow, there will be a two-pack of podcasts, AFC West and NFC West preview shows. So those are coming tomorrow, those two podcasts. Thursday, we're going to do my predictions. My playoff teams for the AFC and NFC, I will go over-unders when it comes to betting and best bets to place going into the start of the season. I will make my Super Bowl prediction. So all that is forthcoming Thursday before the kickoff. Lions, Chiefs, Thursday night. And of course, a slew of games, full slate of games this coming weekend, which I cannot wait for. So that's what's coming for content this week. We also got a UFC pay-per-view this weekend. So it's great stuff. September is here. The weather's nicer than it has been all damn summer, which pisses me off. I don't know about all of you, but I'm going to enjoy that it's nice out, but it couldn't have been nice in July. No, let's get more rain. But you can't control weather. We learned that at a young age, and yet I continue to bitch about it. So I guess I haven't learned much in my almost 25 years of life, which I got a couple days left of being 24 before I am 25. Before we get to college football, I just want to say happy birthday to really the person who makes a few appearances on this show when she feels like speaking up, and that would be Dirk, my little 9.5-pound miniature wiener dog. She's 3 today. If you want to get a dog, get a dog. They're great. And wiener dogs are funny, they're temperamental, but they're great friends. And happy birthday to Dirk. So 3 years old already, which is, I can't believe it. So thank you for letting me indulge on that. Let's pivot to college football. What a weekend. I went into the weekend seeing a few games that I thought were interesting. A few games where I looked at and go, I'm looking forward to watching this. There's some intrigue there. What happens here if this happens? But I thought it was a week one that was just okay, and I looked at the week two slew of games, and okay, week two is better, which it still probably will be. But week one turned out to be very exciting, very interesting, and you could start with Duke, or you could go with Florida State, who Matt Wright correctly predicted would beat LSU, and boy did they over the weekend. So good job to Writer on that prediction. But you have to start with Colorado, the Buffaloes, the team who are 1-11 last year, 1-8 in conference play in the Pac-12, and in the offseason, they did something that nobody in college football really endorsed or nobody in college football really liked. They made Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, their head coach. It was a decision you look at and go, Colorado's desperate, Deion's too flashy, he does things his own way, he's making every one of these kids that's currently on the team transfer, he's bringing in a whole new team, and people didn't like it because forever it's college football. Oh, it's Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney. It has to be done a certain way. The old boys club, the let's not give an answer when we're conducting an interview. Deion Sanders will give you a quote. Deion Sanders will answer the question the way he wants to answer the question. And it was all summer. How's it going to look? How's it going to go for Deion? Is he going to have success? Is he going to look good? Well, week one, they are facing TCU, the team that was in the national championship game last year and came into the season the number 17th ranked team in the country. And Colorado only brought back 3 players from last year's team. 68 players came over in the transfer portal, and they had 8 walk-ons. Shedeur Sanders, Deion's son at quarterback, Travis Hunter, one of the most electric prospects in college football, playing corner and wide receiver like Deion used to do. And it was a fascinating game from start to finish. Colorado defense started off forcing TCU to have a 3-and-out. Then Colorado went on an opening drive touchdown, sending a message, hitting true freshman Dylan Edwards on a wheel route from Shedeur Sanders. And throughout the day, it was, in particular in the second half, it was back and forth. Shedeur goes down the field. Chandler Morris, not a bad quarterback for TCU, goes with a few strikes. TCU starts to run the ball extremely effectively because, as Joel Klatt pointed out correctly in the broadcast, Colorado doesn't have the depth that other teams do. They don't have the players that you necessarily look at and go, okay, that's a stud player that can stop the run. And TCU started to take advantage of it. But Colorado never flinched. They never panicked. They were down with 8 minutes left in the ball game. And what happens? Oh yeah, how about a one-play score from Shedeur Sanders? And he comes over from Jackson State, not an HCBU, not a program that gets a lot of play. And he sets a school record, a Colorado Buffalo record. They've been playing college football a minute. He comes over in his first game, he goes 37 for 46, 510 yards passing, most in school history, and 4 touchdowns. He also, and this is a crazy stat, the Buffaloes had 4 receivers go over 100 yards. They only had 4 100-yard receivers in all their games last year when they went 1-11. So they did something. It took 12 games. They did it in 1 game this season, and back and forth. They didn't turn the ball over. TCU makes a mistake on 4th down. Colorado gets them off the field. And before you know it, the Buffaloes stun TCU in Fort Worth, Texas, and Coach Prime wins his first game. And what was fascinating is they do the interview after the game. Jenny Taft for Fox is with Deion, but he brings over Travis Hunter and his son, arguably the 2 most important players in the game. Travis Hunter made this interception that was one of the most incredible plays I've ever seen, but this kid played 110 snaps, defense and offense. I think he's a better corner than a wide receiver, and I think on this particular team, they need him to play corner. But he can do both. He's got the skill set. And I just never seen anything like it. He brought them both for the interview. He left halfway through it so he could give, the honor to them. They got the praise. He said, these are the players. These are the guys who went out there and won the game. And what was funny is the players talked about Deion, saying we believe this all summer. We came here to win games. We didn't just come here to be some sideshow. And it's 1 game. Yes, it's 1 game. But they only won 1 game all of last year. You just won on the road in 110-degree heat in Texas against the runner-up to the national championship. Sonny Dykes was the Associated Press Coach of the Year in college football. Coach Prime just beat him in his home. in front of their packed crowd, where Fox's crew was there for Big Noon Kickoff, which is the better show now compared to College Game Day. Sorry, Pat McAfee. It's your fault. But this was crazy. So they get week 1, they're on national TV on Fox. They play TCU, they win. What happens in week 2? They're on national TV again when Colorado has their home opener against Nebraska. Matt Rule, another one of these coaches who just came from the NFL, first year at Nebraska, he criticized Deion for the way he's doing the transfer portal and it's wrong and this, that, and the other thing. They have beef. They went at one another in the offseason, and now they get to settle it on the field. Nebraska loses at the buzzer to Minnesota in week 1. The Buffaloes are coming off a big win. But their over-under for the season was 3.5. And they're not going to be a college football playoff team. That's not the story here. But I look at the rest of their schedule. They got Nebraska at home this Saturday. I think they're going to win that game. Then they get Colorado State at home. I think they're going to win that game. So there's 3 games right there. They go to Oregon. Tough game. Oregon's a really good football team. Okay, loss. Home to USC, probably a loss. Arizona State. They can go in and beat Arizona State. Arizona State's in a weird spot right now. They have a new head coach who came over from Oregon. But could they beat Arizona State? Sure. 4-2. Stanford, they can beat Stanford. 5-2. UCLA. If it was UCLA of last year with Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet, I need to see UCLA play more. I think it's a toss-up. Oregon State, tough game. But these games get Arizona, Washington State. I think this team can win 7 to 8 games. Be bowl eligible. Finish 8-4. That's a big deal. For this team to have 1 win and to be in a bowl game the next year at the very least. To go 8-4. That would be a huge moment for Deion just to have that, to be in the mix in the Pac-12 before they pivot to the Big 12 next year. It's a whole season, and you need to do it week after week after week. But he did it at Jackson State. Nobody can tell me he's not bought in. He doesn't want this team to be successful. He might be motivated just to throw it in people's face, and I'm fine with that. Your reasoning or your motivation doesn't have to align with everybody else's. Nick Saban's motivation, who knows? He always says he wants to build young men. We all know that's a crock of shit. That's not the reason he coaches football. But his reasoning, we'll never know because it's Nick Saban, he doesn't share. And I'm not buying that first reason. Wants to build strong young men. Okay. Go to the fucking Marines, Nick. That's what they're doing there. That's what they're doing in the Army. You're coaching football at Alabama. Get over yourself. But if he wants to shove it in people's face, and if he can get to, a Power 5 conference and look at everybody and go, we can compete with you. We just won a non-conference game. We just beat a Big 12 team. They get Nebraska this week. If they can beat a Big 10 and a Big 12 team in 2 weeks to start the season, woo! There's some spice there. Headlines, big moments. And you get to play on Fox in back-to-back weeks. It's pretty exciting. What he did in the first week, Shedeur Sanders looks like a player that can get to the NFL and succeed when he gets there. Great reads, accurate, smart. He just knows where to go with the football. He didn't force throws, made plays happen. He can use his legs if he has to. And they got talent. Dylan Edwards, the running back, had 4 touchdowns himself. Travis Hunter's a stud. Could they pull off an upset during the season where they surprise in Oregon, or they get a USC? Maybe. They play like they did yesterday. Who knows? Because they can score. They can score points. We all know USC doesn't play defense. A lot of teams in the Pac-12 don't play defense. Utah late in the year, maybe. Tough place to play, but they just won on the road, so who knows? I think it's a phenomenal story. I'm not going to go, this team is going to make the playoff or this team is a massive, but I'm going to give props to Dion for doing what nobody thought. He was a 20.5 point underdog. I bet on him this weekend, but I didn't bet on him outright to win. I still made money, however, because I bet on Colorado. If you go back to Friday's show, if you want to see the bets, your boy had a pretty good weekend when it comes to gambling. Put in a little parlay on Saturday, and I'm smiling coming into the airwaves here on Tuesday. But Coach Prime has to be happier as he gears up for Nebraska, because they made a statement and they're on the radar now, certainly. I would say the second biggest story would have to be Sunday night. Game of the weekend. LSU, Florida State. Number 5, LSU. Number 8, Florida State. Florida State had a good season last year. Mike Norvell is having some success down there at FSU. Jordan Travis is a quarterback that a lot of people think he could go high in the NFL draft. He's a dual threat. But I look at FSU and I go, I like their team, but I just think LSU's better. Jaden Daniels is coming back. They have their tight end, running back set. They had a really good time in the transfer portal, a good recruiting class, and it was 17-14 LSU at the half. So, okay, 2 really good teams, which is about what I expected. I expected a close game, but in the second half, it was a blowout. Florida FSU beats LSU 45-24. I got a number of different takeaways from this game, but my biggest one that I love from Florida State is about Jordan Travis. I always looked at him and go, his athleticism was better than his quarterback traits. His legs were better than his arm, than his ability to throw the ball in the pocket and make correct decisions. And, he's predicated on having a good running game. And looking at this weekend, he didn't. They ran for 135 yards, which is good, but not great in college. If we're being honest, it's not, superb. They ran the ball quite a bit, but not a whole lot of success. Jordan Travis ran 7 times, 5-yard average. Hill ran 5 times, 5-yard average. Benson, their starting running back, ran 12 times for 47 yards, 3 yards a clip. That's no good. So they weren't winning on the ground. LSU was winning at the line of scrimmage, and they had to expose the secondary. Travis went 23 for 31, 342 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Only 11-yard average, but he threw it all over the field and made plays. And Florida State can play either way. Their defense was extremely solid in the second half. And the best thing about Florida State is they have 2 wide receivers that are going to the NFL. Keon Coleman had 9 receptions, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then there's Johnny Wilson, who's a wide receiver, tight end hybrid. He's huge. He reminds me of Darren Waller. And he had 7 for 104. So 2 guys every week that'll be asked to do a lot. LSU turned over the ball twice. They made mistakes down in the red zone. And Brian Kelly said, we got our ass kicked. Our team wasn't ready to play. They wanted it more than us. He said, I thought my team was really, really good, and they might not be, which is a harsh statement. But this is a big deal for Florida State. They're another team that has a tough schedule. A really tough schedule. Next couple weeks, Southern Miss, Boston College, not tough. But they get Clemson. We'll talk about Clemson in a minute. Virginia Tech, Duke, tougher game than you might expect. Pitt, I think it's a tougher game in the ACC this year because I think Pitt's pretty good. They get the University of Miami, and they play the Florida Gators to close out the year. But they might have beaten the best team on their schedule in LSU. Neutral site in Orlando, a lot of hype on a Sunday night, and you went out and got it done. You went out and made a statement. But Jordan Travis, I think, is going to leap up draft boards because he's got all the intangibles. He's got the athleticism, and he showed that he can distribute the football from in the pocket and find receivers. Mike Norvell has quietly built a really good program at FSU. He's got the quarterback, finally, at Florida State. A long time he didn't have one. They got receivers who can play with him. They got a defense that can compete at the very least. And they got a dynamic offense. They can make plays happen. They stretch out the defense, and it's a tough day when you're playing FSU. It's a great start. I didn't expect them to win the game. I expected them to lose by a small margin. But they win. And looking at the weekend, you got to think they're the favorite in the Atlantic Coast Conference because last night Clemson is opening up their season. Dabo Swinney says we built a good team, and I thought they did. DJ Ugalele has transferred to Oregon State. He was their problem at quarterback. Cade Klubnik is their new guy. They're playing at Duke. Duke quietly had 9 wins last year, which I forgot that, they're a basketball school. But I forgot they had 9 wins. Before the game started, I knew I liked their quarterback and Riley Leonard. He was a guy I remember watching last year, but I did not remember that they had 9 wins. So Duke's at home. Dabo makes his run out, which he does every game to fire his team up. And it was a tale of two halves. Duke in the first half should have been leading the game by 10 points. But they muffed a punt, which led to Clemson's touchdown. And the only touchdown of the game that Clemson scored, it led to that. And they fumbled inside the Clemson 20, which was Clemson took over the regained possession, and Clemson led at the half 7-6. And I went, oh, Duke's got to be shooting themselves in the foot. They're playing better, but you go into a half against a better program, arguably a better team, and you allowed them to be leading, get back into the fight. But one of the first plays of the second half, Riley Leonard breaks it off for a 42-yard rush touchdown. And before you know it, Duke is just moving the football. And what happens to Clemson, they have 3 turnovers in the second half. Cade Klubnik threw a pick and 2 fumbles. And both fumbles were in FSU territory, and one of the fumbles was on the 1-yard line. They're going to punch in a score. 2 Clemson players run into each other. Ball pops loose. Duke returns, it picks it up, and it goes inside the Clemson 30, which resulted in a touchdown. So they turned the ball over 3 times. They only scored 1 touchdown the entire game. They ran the ball effectively over 209 yards. They had more first downs than Duke, 29-17, more passing yards, more total yards, better time of possession, and yet they lose the game by three touchdowns. Cade Klubnik was not good. He had a 4-yard average throwing the ball. Couldn't connect with receivers, wasn't reading the play well. Duke was doing a good job at getting pressure in his face. But he didn't look like a good college quarterback. He looked nervous. He looked like a guy that wasn't ready for the moment. Will Shipley ran the ball great, so did Phil Maffa. But Klubnik just made stupid mistakes, timely errors. Throw the football away or check the ball down, and he didn't. So Duke beats number 9 Clemson in week 1. Colorado wins in week 1. FSU wins in week 1. It's craziness. It's a long season. Clemson can rebound from this, for sure. Dabo's a good coach. But what I will say is that team did not look like a group that was full of talent. Will Shipley's great. But I don't think the receivers, there's any elite guys there. I think they're going to have to run the football really well, get more physical, win those battles, and not turn the ball over. They're not going to win. They play Florida State on September 23rd. That's the game of the year for them. Because you already have a loss inside the ACC to Duke. You lose the second game, in my mind, you're not going to the college football playoff. They weren't in the mix for the college football playoff last year, so that'd be back-to-back years for Dabo Swinney at Clemson where you're not even being considered. Looking through the year, they got Wake. No Sam Hartman. It's not as big an opponent. They played Miami, who I got to wait to watch them. They got Texas A&M this coming weekend. Maybe there's something there for Miami with Mario Cristobal. If they play well, maybe Miami could win the game. NC State, I think, is better than people give them credit for. Clemson has Notre Dame on their schedule, and I think Notre Dame's really good. I think Notre Dame's a better team than Clemson. Clemson also has to play the University of North Carolina, who are no slouch, and they play South Carolina to close out the year, who, we'll see. So that's not an easy schedule for them. ACC's going to be tough. There's some decent teams. Arguably no great team, but a few good teams that you have to worry about. The rest of the weekend, North Carolina versus South Carolina in Charlotte. I thought Drake May played really well in the game on Saturday night. He was poised, he was calm, cool, and collective, and he made plays. Tail end of last year, I remember watching them. I watched them play Oregon in the bowl game. I watched them play, might have been Clemson late in the year, and I looked at Drake May and I went, I don't know. He's got some flaws. Now, he threw 2 interceptions in this game. 2 fourth-quarter interceptions, but the game was out of hand. It was a weird game because it was over after the third quarter. You knew it. And South Carolina really didn't have anything to go on. Spencer Rattler was getting sacked and harassed quite a bit. But I looked at North Carolina as a whole and I said, Drake May's good. Paysor, the wide receiver, is pretty good. Morales, I like their tight end. They have their senior running back recovered from a torn ACL. He looked explosive. He had 100 yards rushing on the day. He also had a few catches. Drake May did a good job of having the ability to run when he had to, but not doing it too much. For a week 1 game against South Carolina, which I thought was a dangerous opponent, on a neutral field, Saturday night, I thought he played pretty well. Was he the best quarterback of the weekend? No. To me, Joel Klatt's the authority on college football. And he goes, North Carolina's not that talented of a team. And I agree and disagree with him because I think there's some talent there, but it's not loaded. North Carolina's got App State this weekend. Then they play Minnesota in a non-conference game. Pitt, Syracuse, they play Miami. They got Duke, Clemson late in the year, NC State. The ACC's become interesting, for sure. Because I don't think there's any elite team. I think Florida State is by far the best now looking at it, but they have some games where you're going, are they going to win that one? Is there a pothole there for that team that you expect them to get over the hump, but they don't manage to do it? It's a long season, and you got to be up for every game. But I was impressed with Drake May. Oklahoma won 73-0 over the weekend. They played a non-team, a team that Arkansas State, but they get a massive score. So 73-0, that's something you don't see every day. Fresno State beat Purdue. I thought that was a sneaky game for Purdue. Aiden O'Connell departs for the NFL. Fresno State has had a pretty decent little program. They get a win. Michigan wins 30-3. First game with no Jim Harbaugh serving his suspension. They beat East Carolina. They got to keep finding their game, but again, they schedule these easy opponents where they go East Carolina. They have UNLV this weekend, and they have another team that is hardly a team you'd want to challenge. So 3 games that they'll win easy, and then Harbaugh will return, and you ramp up your schedule. Their first game where you'd look at and go, is there a tough opponent there? As I go through the games, week 4, Michigan plays Rutgers. No, it doesn't start week 4. Rutgers is their first conference game, and Rutgers, that's a joke game. That's not a tough game. Michigan, Nebraska, I don't even think that's a tough game in week 5. So Minnesota in week 6 might be their first really tricky game. But I think they only won 30-3 against East Carolina, who's not a great team. But I think Michigan is as good as anybody in the country. Any team, including Georgia, I think they're that talented. They're a veteran team. It's their year to do it. Other headlines. Let's see. Tennessee, slow start with Joe Milton, but they ended up crushing Virginia 49-13. Their defensive line looked good with, I think, 9 sacks on the day. Joe Milton wasn't completing passes. They were struggling. But he went 21 for 30, 201, 2 touchdowns. You'd like to see them throw the ball down the field a little more, but what I did like is they started to run the football. They ended up with 5 rushing touchdowns on the day. And they accepted that. They weren't afraid to do it. So Tennessee, I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. I need to see more of them play, but they, even in that big win, didn't look all that great. Ole Miss crushed Mercer, Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders. Both got playing time. Both looked very solid for their respective teams. And Ole Miss had a hot start last year. They were 6-0, and then they lost their last 5. So we'll see what they do. I talked about this gambling-wise, but I didn't trust Iowa against Utah State. 25-point favorite. Iowa football, they win by 10. They don't even score 25 points. Utah State with the easy cover. That was another easy pick for me. Cade McNamara, first start. They're a good team in the Big Ten, don't get me wrong, but you can't win by more than 10 points against Utah State. That tells you something about Iowa. Love to see that cover. Heisman watch. Yes, it's week 1, but you can start it. Oregon won 81-7. Bo Nix, the little he got to play, only had four incompletions, 3 passing touchdowns. He didn't have to run the ball once the entire game. They were set. He's got Franklin at wide receiver, who's very good. Irving is back. Tyler Johnson at wide receiver. Oregon's still got a good team out there in the Pac-12. One of the teams that was a bigger scare of the week was Ohio State. They beat Indiana, sure, but they won the game by 20 points. Indiana covered the spread. Kyle McCord had 13 incompletions. He did not throw a touchdown, did throw a pick. They didn't run the football all that well. They did get 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. But Marvin Harrison Jr. got injured in the first quarter. He only had 2 catches for 18 yards. And Mickey Ibuka only had 3 catches for 16 yards. He got hurt in the game. He left. So Ohio State looked shaky. They need Marvin Harrison Jr. to be healthy to play games. You might not need him right away because your schedule is not tough out of the gate. But Ohio State did not look. They got Youngstown State this weekend. Marvin Harrison Jr. is even a little bit sore. He's not playing for me because you'll win that game. But that was a team you go, wow, that's a national championship team. You expect to look dominant. Then they play Western Kentucky. They did not look threatening. Their offense did not look dynamic. They didn't have a quarterback that was going to go high in the draft, and it kind of showed. So it's on Ryan Day to improve this offense, make it dynamic. Anything? Georgia crushed UT Martin. No surprise there. USC with Caleb Williams. Heisman watch. He went 18 for 24, 319, 5 touchdowns. Just a quiet 5 tubs. Doing his thing. He hit my guy Zachariah Branch for a touchdown. He only had 1 catch in the game, but he's good on special teams. I still think they need to give him the ball more, but he caught a touchdown in back-to-back games as a true freshman, so that tells you something. The kid's legit. Baylor lost to Texas State. That's a big upset. Vandy beat Alabama and Penn State I watched some of that game as well. They had their ups and downs. They found it. I think Drew Allard he's legit. He's good. He can make plays. You just need the rest of the team to kind of settle down with him and play to their strengths. But I like Lambert Smith. Cephas, the wide receiver, is good. He only had 1 catch. Wyoming upset Texas Tech in double overtime. UCLA because it was a fun weekend in college football. Week 2 coming up. And I mentioned week two's a fun week for games. You got Notre Dame at North Carolina State. More of a tricky game than I think you'd expect. Nebraska, Colorado with the Dion effect makes the game more interesting. Iowa at Iowa State, always a fun battle. Texas A&M at Florida. Ole Miss at Tulane. 2 ranked clubs facing off early in the year. You got SMU at Oklahoma. I want to see how Oklahoma plays in that game. SMU is a better team than you'd expect. Then you go with the 8 o'clock showdown between Texas and Alabama. They played last year in week 2. Alabama squeaked out a win. Both win in week 1. It's in Tuscaloosa. Can Steve Sarkisian, who used to be on Nick Saban's staff, pull off a big win? Because Texas needs one. You also, that night, Get Wisconsin at Washington State, a little Big Ten versus Pac-12 action. Arizona at Mississippi State, that game's a little spicy for me. Stanford at USC, Oklahoma State, Arizona State, and Auburn, and Cal. So week 2, some fun games upcoming we're going to track out. We'll talk about the betting for these games on Friday alongside with the NFL games. So Fridays now is going to be a heavy gambling day. We'll talk about best bets for college. We'll talk about best bets for the NFL and just fun props, things of that nature. So betting Fridays on To The Point are returning. Stoked for that. And that will be fun content coming your way. But that's college football week 1 in a nutshell. Look, the second thing that caught my attention this weekend, if I'm watching sports, it was the U.S. Open. Tennis, 4 majors, you hone in on the majors and the U.S. Open. When you have prime time and you have things of that nature, you really get psyched up for that. It started on Saturday where Alina Rybakina, number 4 seed, former Wimbledon champion, loses to Sorana Cristea, number 30th seed from Romania, in an upset. And through all of that, you go through matches, you see Coco Gauff get by Caroline Wozniacki. Wozniacki, great run to the round of 16. I didn't expect her to get that far. So just doing that is just incredible in and of itself. Carlos Alcaraz plays Dan Evans in a really fun match. 2 guys that Carlos Alcaraz is the funnest player to watch in tennis. It's not close. Djokovic isn't close. When it comes to, I think Carlos Alcaraz makes every one of his opponents look better or look more entertaining because of what he forces them to do. They have to try different shots. They have to do different angles because he goes, well, I'm doing it, so you have to. Guess what? I'm going to do this return to you, and you're going to have to do something with it if you want to stay in the point. And Dan Evans, who I like from Great Britain, he played hard, and he made some incredible shots, but ultimately he loses to Carlos because Carlos is awesome. So that was fun. And I initially thought, okay, well, Carlos beats Dan Evans. He's going to face a qualifier, Arnaldi, who he beat yesterday. He's gearing up for a Jannik Sinner quarterfinal. But last night, I realized if he went to bed, Alexander, aka Sasha Zverev, plays Jannik Sinner second on Ash. Sabalenka cruises to an easy win. We'll talk about the women's draw. But you get Zverev versus Sinner. 5-set thriller, late match. They both threw everything they had at one another. Zverev wins the first set. Sinner comes back in the second. Zverev wins the third. Sinner catches a break early in the fourth, and then Zverev fought his way. And something I'll credit him for is normally you see him lose these matches. It goes 5 sets, and his opponent has more in the tank. But he battled. He fought through it. This is the major. He made his only Grand Slam final, and he lost to Dominic Thiem way back when. But he's now 4-1 all-time head-to-head against Jannik Sinner. And I thought Sinner would be the one to dethrone Carlos, because I didn't think last year's winners were Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Swiatek. Carlos beat Casper Ruud. Swiatek beat Ons Jabeur. On the women's draw, both the women are out. On the men's draw, Casper Ruud is done. Carlos remains in a quarterfinal slot. He won in straight sets. He now gets Zverev, who just played over 4 hours, and he'll get today off, and I imagine Carlos will be playing tomorrow night on primetime. But that's not an easy turnaround to get the number 1 player in the world after that long of a fight. Zverev has played good tennis. He's kept his composure for the most part. His ground strokes are extremely solid. He's forcing his opponents to make really difficult shots on the run. I just think Sinner plays such an interesting style. He plays Carlos very tough. He goes, I think for any opponent, you need to go big against Carlos. You need to go big on the serve. You need to go big on the forehand and make him make shots that he normally doesn't. Or make him uncomfortable is a better way to define that. But credit to Zverev. Incredible match. The Open's been extremely fun so far. Today you have Taylor Fritz playing Novak Djokovic. Novak has beaten Taylor Fritz in all 7 previous matchups. But it's fascinating because you have Fritz, who's been dominant, and Novak, who had that scare in the 3rd round, went to 5 sets, but I never thought he was going to lose that match. So Fritz has looked phenomenal, hasn't dropped a set yet, has dropped his serve once, and Novak, who has looked pretty incredible himself. I thought that was going to be prime time, but it's this afternoon. It's following Coco Gauff's match. I'm not betting against Novak. I said before I thought Novak Djokovic was going to win this tournament. Still the best player in the world for me. Fritz is game. He might be the best American male tennis player in the world. I think Tiafoe's right there with him. And both men are playing today. But for Taylor, keep serving the way he's serving. He's hitting the ground strokes incredibly well. And sometimes you got to hope your opponent's just off. If Novak Djokovic in the 3rd round was playing maybe a Taylor Fritz or a Carlos or a Sinner, he would have lost. But he was playing Laszlo Djere, a countryman, and yes, as a country, but he's not a great player. He's a good tennis player, but he's not a great one. He's never been to a Grand Slam round of 16. So Novak came back and he dusted off the next 3 sets and he moves on. I think Novak's played okay. I thought he played the 4th round against another unseeded opponent in Gojo, and he won in straight sets, but he didn't play great tennis. I thought it would be an easier win. It took longer than I think even Novak expected. And for him to win today, he's going to have to play extremely well against Taylor Fritz because Taylor Fritz is game. Taylor Fritz is a really good opponent. He's talented. He's getting better every year. And then you get, on primetime, you get Tiafoe and Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton's 20 years old. First year at NCAA ranks. And this is his 2nd major quarterfinal. Made the quarterfinal in Australia, lost to Tommy Paul. Round of 16 here at the Open, he beats Tommy Paul in 4 sets. Beats a countryman, and now he gets another one in Francis Tiafoe, who made the semifinals at the Open last year, and he's looking to repeat that achievement to maintain those ranking points. I think this is fun because you have Shelton, who can hit a serve 150 miles per hour, and you have Tiafoe, who will make you run, will force you to go on long rallies, and he'll hit shots that you don't expect to see coming. So the Open decides to go with an All-American matchup not featuring Novak Djokovic instead of going Djokovic and Fritz. I thought primetime decisions today were interesting. Coco Gauff's on the court right now. Novak Djokovic is on the court following the conclusion of that match. The women's match this evening is Karolina Muchova, who is a very good tennis player. She made the final in Cincinnati, and she's had her best season by far on the tour. But she's not a huge name. When you could have had Coco Gauff on primetime, but she's playing currently. Interesting. Tonight you have Sorana Cristea, who's in her first Grand Slam quarter. She's from Romania, looking to become the 2nd ever Grand Slam champion from Romania since Simona Halep. Muchova made the final at the French Open, lost to Swiatek made the final in Cincinnati, lost to Coco Gauff. So she could face Coco Gauff in the semifinal of a rematch of a couple weeks ago. Coco Gauff's 19. She's incredibly talented. She's had the summer of her life when it comes to success. 2 tournament wins. She's now in a quarterfinal at the US Open. She's the highest seeded player remaining in her half after Swiatek got upset by Yelena Ostapenko. And you look at the women's draw, she'd be the second biggest favorite. On the other side, you have Aryna Sabalenka, who's made the semifinal at the first 3 majors this year. She plays Gane, who's in her first career major quarterfinal. You also have Madison Keys, Vondrousova will play each other. Vondrousova won Wimbledon. Keys has been to a Grand Slam final but hasn't broken through yet. So it's big moments. I think the Keys-Vondrousova match is really good. I think the Sabalenka match has the potential to be very entertaining as well. But she's really honed her game. She wins the first Grand Slam of the year, and she hasn't fallen off. She's kept her composure. And after winning last night's match, doesn't matter if she wins a Grand Slam. Swiatek's out in the 4th round. After the Open, when the rankings are updated, she will be the new number 1 player in the world for the women's draw. Just like Novak Djokovic will be the new number 1 player for the men, regardless if Carlos Alcaraz can defend his Grand Slam title here in New York. But the tennis has been very good. It's been entertaining. The crowds have been fun. Aaron Rodgers was out. Aaron Judge, saw him there last night catching some tennis. Only a few days left. You got quarterfinals today and tomorrow. Women's semis on Thursday, men's semis on Friday. Then we wrap it up on Saturday and Sunday. Something I said about the Open for a year, the only thing they do wrong is they schedule the men's final for Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon is the first week 1 of the NFL season. The first slate of games, the first full slate, and nobody cares about the tennis. And it doesn't matter who's playing. It's always secondary. It's always on the back burner. It's never on the first TV. I think it's a mistake. If you could get, I don't think it'd be a horrible thing to have the men and the women finish on the same day. I know that's always okay. You go the women on Saturday, men on Sunday. It doesn't work if you're thinking about ESPN, who has this tournament throughout, and you love having it throughout because it's great programming, and I think the ratings have been pretty good. They had the game on ABC on Sunday afternoon. Yes, I was watching with my mother. They had it on ABC. That's great. But if you go through an entire tournament and you finish with kind of a wet fart on a Sunday afternoon because nobody gives a shit that your product's on, and it could be Djokovic Alcaraz, which will be awesome. It'll be a phenomenal tennis match. The 2 best players in the world. Maybe I'll be wrong and they'll meet in the final. I predicted they wouldn't. But after Sinner loses, and you're going to have a tired Zverev, maybe Medvedev can knock off Carlos. He lost the first set last night, but he mowed through the next 3 against Alex de Minaur. Maybe he will be the one to surprise. I don't think it's anybody coming from the Djokovic half of the draw. The American crowd would love it because you have 3 Americans and Novak in that side. But I don't think it's coming from there. So maybe you will get Carlos versus Novak like you did at Wimbledon, like you did in the semifinal at the French, like you did in the final in Cincinnati, and it'll be a thriller because both guys are phenomenal. Both guys can do anything. But people won't care because you'll be watching Steelers and 49ers. The best 2 o'clock game. People will be tuned in to we go through the 2 o'clock games. 5:25, we'll be watching Chargers and Dolphins from SoFi. That's interesting. Let's watch this. It won't be top of mind. So finding a way to get better scheduling so you don't get in this predicament would be something I would have figured out a long damn time ago. But clearly it's not that important to the Open or the TV people. I think it would be because I don't think the ratings are always that good. They can't be because the NFL is huge. Huge. Speaking of the NFL, nothing too crazy happened over the weekend. Terrence Steele, a Cowboys tackle, got a long-term extension, but Tuesday, 2:03 Atlantic, Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs still does not have a contract. He's holding out. Wants more money, wants a new deal. The Chiefs play in 2 days. He's their best defensive player. He's their second most important player on that team. And he's nowhere to be seen. That's a big deal. Not just for Thursday's game and the betting line, but they need him in there. And Andy Reid can say, I work with the people that are here, coach speak, all of that, but it certainly looks like he's not going to be playing in week 1 because he's not available right now. Nick Bosa, he's also holding out. He's also doesn't have a new contract yet. The 49ers have a few extra days, but they play on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the way it sounded with injuries, I read a report this morning on Twitter, the 49ers do not expect to have Nick Bosa or George Kittle in week 1. 2 extremely important players to that team. If you recall, the 49ers lost to the Chicago Bears last year in week 1 on the road. The Bears had a horrible season, and I expect the 49ers to be good, but it doesn't mean they'll be fantastic to start off the year. We'll see what happens with the 49ers and with the Chiefs, but 2 of the best pass rushers in the NFL, 2 guys that can wreck defenses, may not be on the field because as of right now, there's no updates, there's no contract. Sounds like Chris Jones and the Chiefs aren't having regular conversations, so it's hard to get a deal done. It's hard to get anything done without communication. So that's what's happening with the NFL. But we got games this week. It's phenomenal. Oh, and as I said, as we're talking about this, great. Diana Rossini, who now used to work for the Mothership, she now works for The Athletic. Joe Burrow, Nick Bosa, Chris Jones, and Justin Jefferson all have contract offers on the table. I know Justin Jefferson wants to get his deal done before the season starts. He's the best receiver in the NFL. I would sign him. It is weird that they don't have Kirk Cousins signed to a deal past this year. But I would still keep Justin Jefferson because I don't give a crap what quarterback I have coming in. He makes them better. Joe Burrow starting this season without a contract is crazy to me. He's the second best quarterback in the NFL. He's the heartbeat of that team. He's a guy that actually wants to play in Cincinnati. And I get their owner is a cheap bastard, but I don't care. You have a quarterback for the first time. Keep him. Don't piss him off. Sign him to a deal. He deserves more money than Justin Herbert. He deserves more money than Lamar Jackson because he's done something they haven't done. He's gotten his team to the damn Super Bowl. He got them to the AFC Championship game last year. And if Chris Jones doesn't sack him with 3 minutes left, they might go to back-to-back Super Bowls, and who knows, maybe they'd win it. But the fact that it's a deliberation, the fact that it's not done yet with a quarterback, these contracts are not that difficult. Because when it comes to a quarterback, you just give him the money. Herbert's contract and Allen got a contract. Lamar, Herbert, Mahomes. It's Joe Burrow's turn. Jalen Hurts got a contract. But if there's a place that'll screw this up, it's Cincinnati, because it's a bunch of cheapos and they don't want to give him money. Okay. Remember when Carson Palmer left and you had Andy Dalton for a decade and you didn't win jack shit? You didn't win a playoff game for 15 years with Marvin Lewis? Want to go back to those days? With Andy Dalton and Brandon Allen as your quarterback duo? Putting the fear of God in people? And you make a wild card every second year, but then you get to the playoff game and get smoked by the Steelers? I'd want to keep Joe Burrow. He's not a guy go, oh, let's go in the draft. We can find a better solution. No, you won't. Unless you're getting Caleb Williams, who's a generational talent, which they won't get, you're not getting somebody. So sign the guy. If I go Jefferson, so there's Burrow, Justin, Bosa, and Chris Jones. The four of them. If I had to rate it, I think before Sunday's kickoff, I'm going to go Joe Burrow. I'm going to go 55% that he has his contract signed, sealed, delivered, long-term in Cincinnati. Again, I'm banking on Cincinnati to be smart. There's not a rush for this, you could say. But if I'm Joe Burrow, why the hell am I getting back on the field? I got hurt in training camp. Give me my money. I'll go 55%. Justin Jefferson, by Sunday, I'm going to go 80%. I think that's getting done before Sunday. I think they want to get it done. I think he wants to get it done. He wants a big check. If you got a guy who wants to stay in cold-ass Minnesota, you pay the guy. No offense, Minnesota. You can take offense if you feel bad about it. I won't feel bad. So take offense if that's the way you want to go with it. But I'm going to go 80% on Justin Jefferson because I think it's been close. I think they've been close on specific details for a long time. They'll wrap it up. Nick Bosa. His brother Joey didn't mind a holdout. That family wants to get their money. I think they're the Kachuk version of the NFL, and that's a compliment. You play the game, yes, you want to win, of course, but at the end of the day, you play the game to make dollars, to get money. And I'm going to go 40%. I think he at least misses a week. This could be an Emmitt Smith situation where you look around and go, God, we miss Nick Bosa. We need him back. He might play week 2. And Chris Jones, I'm going to go 10%. 10% doesn't sound good. And again, he's got to play by Thursday. You sign him. Is he going to be available by Thursday? Unlikely. So decisions for all these teams. Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow are both at practice. So that's different situations than the other two. But I just feel those two deals are close. Jefferson, I give the best odds of happening. But it'll be something to monitor before the season kicks off Thursday night in Kansas City. Over the weekend, we had another UFC event in Paris. UFC Paris. Paris is an awesome city for these events. They are a great crowd. They said they're unlikely to go back next year because of the Olympics, which I get. But it was a really fun event. A lot of French fighters had good nights. Taylor Lapillus fighting Colin Laughlin. Cage Warriors champion, came in on short notice. Laughlin was cocky before, giving people the finger, doing a bunch of brash stuff. But this is about Lapillus. This is his first UFC fight since 2016. Had to battle his way back into the promotion. And he looked fantastic. Great striking and gave some really good damage, just landing good shots. Defended the takedowns well. Laughlin pushed him against the cage, trying to get him in the clinch. But Lapillus was by far the better fighter. He landed the better shots, and he was cool, calm, and collected the entire fight. He wins via unanimous decision, 29-28, and a huge win at home for him. Lachlan puts his tail between his legs, doesn't look all that good. He fought okay, but he was brash before, and when you're that cocky and you don't win, you eat it. Morgan Carrier, UFC debut. He gets a big win. He looked good in that fight. Starting off the main card, he comes out, crowd's going crazy. He knocks out Zucchini in the first round, landing body shots, and now he's set in the UFC. William Gomez beats Yanis Shamiri versus a third round KO. We get into the bigger events. Light heavyweight, Bogdan Guskov, Volkan Ozdemir. I expected Guskov to win. Ozdemir was on a slide. He had been struggling for a while. He looked great. He was sharp. He got a takedown on Guskov and controlled him for a bit. And his boxing was the best I've seen him fight in years. In years. And he gets a submission, rear naked choke in the first round. So he gets a statement win. He's a ranked guy in the light heavyweight division. I don't know who's next for him because he's fought the who's who of fighters at light heavyweight. I thought maybe Anthony Smith would make sense if Anthony Smith wanted to come back after his last fight where it took a lot out of him. Dominic Reyes hasn't fought all year. Anthony Smith fought Ozdemir back in 2018, and he beat him, but it went nearly 3 rounds. So I don't know if Anthony Smith wants to have another fight with a guy that he's fought before, like he did with Ryan Spann. But Ozdemir has fought a lot of really tough opponents. And light heavyweight, it's an interesting division for sure. He's 9, Anthony Smith is 8. Nikita Krylov hasn't fought in a long time. He's dealing with an injury. You have Rakic, who hasn't fought all year after blowing his knee out last year. So that could be a fight. I thought maybe you want to fight a guy lower in the rankings again. Khalil Roundtree, surging prospect. I wouldn't want to fight him because I think he's dangerous. But be curious to see what they do with him when it comes to booking because it's not easy because he has fought a lot of guys that are tough. Then we get to Benoit Saint-Denis, Thiago Moises. What a fight. Benoit Saint-Denis is just a straight killer. He's a straight killer. Every fight he goes into, he attacks, he presses, and he's going to do whatever it takes to get the win. He doesn't want to win via decision. He wants to get the finish. He wants to have his moment in the cage, and he had another one. Great punches, going in, nailing the body, gets him on the ground, and he's constantly attacking. He's not afraid to mix it up and do whatever it takes to win. And at the end of that second round, he was pressing and he wanted that. He didn't want to go into the third. He wanted to win. He just kept playing. Haymaker after haymaker with the ground strikes. The ref stepped in. He gets a win. He's now 12-1 as a pro. He beat Ishmael Bonfim in July, which was a huge win in my mind. He beat Nicholas Stolze. He beat Gabriel Miranda. He hasn't lost since 2021. That was his only loss in the UFC, and he's gotten better since. I think he's right on the cusp of being a ranked fighter in the lightweight division, and I think the UFC should book him against Matt Frevola. Matt Frevola, who in his last fight knocked out Matt Frevola, I had that right in the top of my mind. It was kind of a surprising knockout, to be honest. Now it's going to bother me. I have to go find it. He knocked out a good fighter, too. He's ranked at the time. Drew Dober. Knocked out Drew Dober. And Frevola is ranked 14th, but it's his first time in the rankings. I'm sure he wants to get a guy higher than himself. But I think that's a war. I think that's a fun fight. I think Frevola would be down for that. So that's the fight I would make. From the UFC, that's where I'm going with that. But really impressive. Co-main event, Manon Firot, Rose Namajunas. Rose Namajunas' first fight in the flyweight division. Didn't go all that well. She broke her finger in a nasty way in the contorted in the first round. Firot was just bigger. She's stronger. She's bigger. Rose tried to shoot for takedowns. They didn't work. Her boxing was better. She really touched up Thug Rose quite well. And Firot, again, she improves to 11-1. She wins on home soil. She looks great. So now is it Manon Firot or Erin Blanchfield that gets a title opportunity after UFC Nosh in 2 weeks when Alexa Grasso fights Valentina Shevchenko? I think Erin Blanchfield was more impressive. I think Erin Blanchfield she's had more impressive finishes, more impressive outings in the UFC. And I also think Taila Santos was a tougher opponent for the weight class because Rose is not a flyweight. She needs to go back down. That's her weight class. I thought she fought well. She didn't look like she didn't want to be in there, like she's mentioned before. So I don't think it'd be a time for her to consider retirement unless she wants to. But in her next fight, it shouldn't be at flyweight. She's not as big as these other girls. It's not going to work. But Firot and Erin both have only lost one time in their pro career. Erin has not lost in the UFC, neither has Firot. They both have a legitimate argument to square off for the belt. The problem is there's a championship fight in 2 weeks. When will the champion defend their title again? Sometimes it's just about waiting around. Grasso won the title in March. So now it's how long until you want to defend it again? Because I believe she won it in March. She did, March 4th. And now you're fighting in September. So would you fight in March again? Is that a decent turnaround? And the problem is, what are you going to do with the other? They're going to be bored. Is there a fight that makes sense for them? Are they just going to sit there and wait? Kind of like Bilal Muhammad is doing right now in their welterweight division, where he should be the one fighting Leon Edwards for the belt, but it's Colby Covington for whatever reason. And he has to sit there and just wait for his opportunity. Wait for his next fight, which could come, who the hell knows, end of next year. Leon Edwards is not exactly the most active fighter in the world. Fought in February, hasn't fought since. There's no date for his next fight. No date for him and Covington's fight. We think it's December, but there's nothing signed, sealed, delivered yet, so it could be any time. December pay-per-view, we don't have a headliner yet. It's going to be Prohaska and Pereira. Prohaska, another guy. He's been healthy as a horse forever. So he says to Ariel Helwani, and so does Ariel Helwani reports that. But you get no fight booked. Hear nothing about that fight. Are they going to add it to New York? Decisions to be made. Then the main event, I got this wrong. Cyril Gane, Sergey Spivak. Cyril Gane, back in France, looked phenomenal. It was a perfect fight for him. Perfect fight. Didn't allow Spivak to get him to the ground. Defended the one takedown he attempted. Controlled the tempo. Landed any shot he wanted to. Started to attack the body. And just landed shot after shot after shot. And he landed 111 strikes to, I think, Spivak's 11 in the total in the entirety of the fight. And this is, you look at Cyril Gane, he's got the body, you look at him, you go, he's going to be a champion. All the talent in the world, and yet he's had stinkers against Francis fighting for the belt, and an even bigger stinker fighting against John Jones for the belt. And now he's back to number 1 in the rankings, following this victory, I believe. He's back to number 1. He passed Sergey Pavlovich. So what now? Stipe against John Jones in November, and Pavlovich is weighing in as the backup for the second time for a John Jones title fight. Curtis Blades has Gelton Almeida. Then there's Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall said he wants to fight Pavlovich. If I'm Pavlovich, I'm weighing in for a fight. I weighed in for 2 title fights. I'm not fighting anybody. I deserve a look. I deserve the next chance to become the heavyweight champion of the world. So what I think will happen, Cyril Gane's next fight is going to be against Tom Aspinall. And I'm all for it. It's a fun fight, and it's really the only fight that these two can make for the UFC can book for these guys. Stipe, booked. Pavlovich, likely not going to fight. Blades, booked. Tai Tuivasa, fighting this weekend. Volkov, fighting this weekend. Spivak, just fought and lost. Derek Lewis, too low. Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall, that can be a main event. It doesn't have to be on a pay-per-view. That's a 5-round fight to me. Heavyweights like their time off. Book it next year. Book it next year, and I would coincide it with whatever. And again, this can change if John Jones retires. Because if John Jones retires, I'm going with Pavlovich and Aspinall for the belt. Cyril Gane's gotten 2 cracks. He's not getting another one until he earns it, until he keeps getting wins. If John Jones beats Stipe Miocic and goes, you know what? All these young guys think they're better than me. I'll fight the winner of. I'll fight the next contender. Then you do it. Otherwise, I don't know. Or you book it in New York as a co-main event. 3 rounds, Aspinall and Pavlovich. But he's weighing in as the backup, so that's unlikely to happen. But the UFC kind of has to figure out what's John Jones going to do. Stipe, he's going to retire, win or lose, in my mind. John Jones, he's an enigma. I don't think he's going to, maybe he'll retire in the cage. If he does, then you have another interim championship that you have to deal with. And again, Pavlovich, Aspinall, because that's the fight to make. And then if Cyril Gane has to wait around for another fight where maybe he fights Alexander Volkov if he beats Bam Bam this weekend, or if he fights Gelton Almeida if he can beat Curtis Blades in their matchup in Sao Paulo in November, then that's what you do. The light heavyweight's currently vacant. A heavyweight could be vacant after November, so and you have to make all these decisions and find fights. And it sounds like Dana White said on the Contender Series presser Tuesday night, next year's going to be a big year. They're booked till March already. They got fights booked till March. I think they're going to China next year, and I think they might even be going to Africa next year. Be tough to pull off, but if Israel Adesanya, who's defending his middleweight championship this weekend against Sean Strickland, if he can win that fight and Dricus du Plessis is still the guy he wants to fight next, you put that fight in Africa and it'll crush. If you can get a fight in China, you go with Zhang Weili against Yang Xiangnan, even though Tyler Santos could be fighting for the belt, she'd be worthy of it. That's not the fight to make because it's in China. 2 Chinese fighters fighting for the belt. It's a star-studded affair. Who isn't buying into that? It'll do crazy numbers. The crowd will be fantastic. But Cyril Gane looks good. He improves to 12-2. His only losses as a pro were in title fights. UFC 293 this weekend in Australia. Adesanya Strickland. You have Tai Tuivasa, Alexander Volkov, and the co-main. Manil Kape, a surging flyweight, fighting Felipe Dos Santos. Dos Santos was supposed to be on the Contender Series 2 weeks ago. His opponent couldn't make the fight, so they give him this opportunity because Kai Kara-France has a concussion. So great there. Justin Taffa, Austin Lane, rematch of UFC Jacksonville when the fight was ended due to an accidental eye poke. Tyson Pedro, Anton Turlock, light heavy. This got Jack Jenkins, an Australian fighter who's really fun against Chepi Mariscal, who, again, another guy. Carlos Oberg has been on a run as of late. Jamie Malarkey. Not the best pay-per-view in the world, but it's a pay-per-view. It's in Australia. It'll be fun. That's coming up this weekend. Quickly to baseball. Big notes from this weekend. The Jays are on a streak. They're winning games. They're playing bad teams, and that's what you got to do. You got to beat them. Take 2 or 3 from the Rockies, win in extras against the Oakland Athletics yesterday. Narrowly beating the Oakland Athletics. But they get the win. That's the biggest thing. Guys are hurt. No Bichette, no Matt Chapman. Danny Jansen's on the AL, but guys are stepping up. And the Texas Rangers, their slide is continuing. They got crushed 13-6 yesterday against the rival, the Houston Astros. And now the Blue Jays only trail them by half a game for the final wildcard spot in the American League. So you got to keep taking care of business. They play 2 more against the Athletics. They play the Kansas City Royals for 3 games. So Kansas City's now actually the worst team in baseball, surpassing Oakland. So they got the 2 worst teams in baseball this week. Oakland with 42 wins, so does Kansas City. So both teams are just pathetic. You got to win those games. Houston plays Texas 2 more times this week. Somebody's got to lose. That's the best thing about those games. Quite honestly, you kind of want Houston to win because, yes, they might gain ground in the second wild card spot, but you want to get in at this point. Baltimore has won 3 in a row. They look like they were skidding a bit, but no, they get back on track. They're 86-51. They take 2 or 3 in Arizona. They win last night in Los Angeles. They're impressive. NL wildcard, Arizona, Cincinnati, and the Marlins all tied for the final wildcard spot. San Francisco is only a game back, so it's just pandemonium down there. Craziness. Chicago has a good 3-game lead for the second wildcard spot. They're just trying to catch Milwaukee at this point. Philadelphia leads every team by 5.5 games. They're in a good spot. They know where they're going to be. Between Arizona and Cincinnati, the Marlins have a tough schedule. They got the Dodgers this week. Then you look at Cincinnati, they're playing the Seattle Mariners. And Arizona's got the Rockies. So they got the best matchup of the 3, but it's just about finding wins at this point. The Cubs start a series with the Giants this week as well. So big series for both of those teams. And really, the statement of the weekend in baseball was the Atlanta Braves. They went into Chavez Ravine to play the Dodgers, where they have not played good baseball over the last 4 to 5 years. And they took 3 of 4. 3 of 4 games. Ronald Acuna Jr. homered in all 4 games, which is impressive for him. Joined the 30-homer, 60-steal club. He's up to 33 home runs now. The Braves have 90 wins, the first team in baseball this year to achieve that milestone. And both teams are great. Both teams are, I think, the 2 best teams in baseball. But the Braves sent a message. We're going to get home field advantage in all likelihood unless everything goes to shit this month. But if we have to when we come play road games here, we're not afraid. We know how to win here. We can beat you. Our pitching is better, which it is. It's the Dodgers' biggest weakness. It's their Achilles heel. They also, Julio Urias, who you could maybe say is their ace of their staff, got arrested on a felony domestic violence yesterday. So he might not be available the rest of the year. So he might be gone. No Dustin May. Tony Gonsolin as having Tommy John. He's gone. No Walker Buehler. They are thin. And no Julio Urias. It's going to be a bunch of guys you never heard of. And Clayton Kershaw, who is on the last year of his deal and could be done with baseball after October. At the very least, could be done in Los Angeles. So big news there. We got Texas and Houston this week. Twins are playing the Guardians, big series. You get some importance down the stretch. Every game matters for these teams as we get closer and closer to the postseason. Tomorrow on the pod, AFC West and NFC West NFL previews. Both will be tomorrow. Then we got the over-unders. We got my predictions on playoff teams and who's going to win every division. That's coming Thursday. So gear up. The NFL is back in just 2 nights. Hope you all had a great Labor Day. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful Tuesday. We'll be back with you tomorrow here on To The Point.